The luxury star cruiser Envoy of Concord shimmered against the blackness of the Thessari expanse, its sleek silver frame reflecting the stars like scattered diamonds. On-board representatives from over a dozen intelligent species had gathered for one purpose: to welcome the elusive Xandari into the stellar accord. Lieutenant Elias Reeve adjusted the collar of his diplomatic uniform for the fifth time in as many minutes. "You ever get the feeling we're all just one wrong word away from intergalactic war?" he muttered. "Only every time you speak," Commander Rihanna Tal replied without looking at him, her steel blue eyes focused on her datapad. Elias grinned. "You wound me, Commander. You'll be wounded for real if you mess up again, like you did at the Farathi Moon Conference." "That was a misunderstanding of hand gestures. Their ambassador thought you proposed to his son. I was asking for more water." Rihanna finally looked at him. "And yet here you are, our cultural liaison to the Xandari. Try not to accidentally marry anyone this time. I make no promises." The grand banquet hall of the Envoy was a marvel. Transparent ceiling panels offered a view into the drifting nebulae above, while floating hollow chandeliers emitted soft pulses of calming light. Tables were arranged in concentric arcs around a central dais, each adorned with cuisine tailored to the attending species' biology and palate. The Xandari delegation stood out immediately. Tall, willowy beings with iridescent skin that shimmered with color, depending on their emotional state. They moved with a grace that made them appear to float rather than walk. Their garments were layered with woven light, constantly shifting patterns that seemed to speak their own silent language. Elias spotted her immediately. Tiren, the junior diplomatic attaché from the Xandari. He'd seen her in briefings, hollow recordings, and distant observations. Nothing had prepared him for her in person. Her eyes were a deep violet, almost luminescent, framed by hair that shimmered from white to silver blue with every movement. Her body language was precise, formal, and yet curious. She was watching the humans as much as they were watching her. Commander Tal's voice jolted him out of his trance. "Reeve, stay focused. The Xandari are emotional telepaths. They read more than just your words." "That's not at all terrifying," Elias muttered. The formal greetings began. Ambassador Veln of the Xandari addressed the gathering in a slow, melodic tongue, translated in real time by the diplomatic implants in everyone's ears. "We come seeking unity through understanding," Veln said, bowing his head. "And we hope your kind will prove worthy of mutual trust." Charming, Elias thought. No pressure. When the seating began, Elias found himself directly across from Tiren. Fate coincidence. A deliberate setup from Commander Tal. Tiren inclined her head toward him. "Lieutenant Elias Reeve," she said in fluent intergalactic common. Her voice had the smooth cadence of a well-played string instrument. "Your name translates roughly as bringer of light. And is that intentional?" "Only if you count the time I lit my quarters on fire trying to make coffee," Elias quipped. She blinked. "You are joking." "Mostly. The ice, if it could be called that, broke just enough to crack." As the courses began to arrive, servers offered various dishes to each table. Elias took note of the Xandari food, delicate tendrils of pale bioluminescent fungi, a mist of aroma rather than a sauce, and some kind of transparent root gelatin that pulsed slightly as if it had its own heartbeat. "Would you care to try a Terran appetizer?" Elias offered, pushing forward a tray of roasted pulse fruit in honeyed glaze. Tiren accepted one, delicately placing it between her elongated fingers. She brought it to her mouth and took the tiniest of bites. Her eyes widened slightly. Sweet and dense, like eating sunlight condensed into matter. "That's the best review I've ever heard," Elias said. "Now I'm curious, what's yours like?" He reached for the translucent root gelatin without hesitation. Tirene nodded slowly. "That is called sa-tien. It is traditionally consumed during bonding ceremonies." Elias paused mid-bite. "Bonding between partners," she clarified. "Life-bonded pairs." He froze. "Is that? Should I not?" But it was too late. The gelatin was in his mouth, and it was odd, not unpleasant, slightly electric on the tongue, like static before a lightning strike. But more importantly, Tiren was now watching him with wide, glimmering eyes. Color rippled across her skin, blue first, then rapidly flushing to violet, then a sharp pulse of red. She began to cough. Tiren Elias stood quickly. She waved a hand, trying to regain her composure, but the coughing persisted. The Xandari ambassador rose, his expression thunderous. Lieutenant, what have you done? I didn't know, Elias stammered. I thought we were just sharing food. You consumed Sathian, Ambassador, Veln growled, and made direct eye contact while doing so. Tiren coughed one last time and gulped down a tall glass of pale nectar, finally settling. Her skin had now settled on a rose gold hue, confusion and embarrassment, if Elias remembered his briefing correctly. The hall had fallen into an uncomfortable silence. Then a rumbling voice broke it. A massive figure from the Kothari table, resembling a bipedal panther, crossed with a boulder, chuckled deeply. The human courts boldly, he growled. Among my people, such confidence would earn a duel or a mating. Can we not jump straight to either of those, Elias whispered. Commander Tal's voice crackled in his earpiece. Congratulations, Lieutenant. You may have just accidentally proposed marriage. Lieutenant Elias Reeve stood motionless as diplomatic chaos bloomed around him. Ambassador Veln barked something sharp in Xandari, his voice slicing through the tension like a blade. Two of his aides immediately stepped between Tiren and Elias, as if he might physically combust into an insult. Tiren, still flushed with bioluminescent hues of confusion, lowered her head, an expression Elias hoped meant embarrassment, and not some deeper signal of outrage. Commander Tal stormed toward him from the far side of the banquet floor, her expression carved from stone. I leave you alone for 5 minutes, she hissed. What did you say? What exactly did you say and do? I offered her food, Elias said, and then I ate hers. You ate bonding jelly during a formal dinner with an alien diplomat known for their sacred courtship traditions? I didn't know it was bonding jelly. Tal muttered a word in her native Gaelic that even the universal translator flagged as untranslatable, but deeply offensive. 20 minutes later, Elias stood uncomfortably still inside the primary diplomatic debrief chamber. The room designed for quiet negotiation now buzzed with tension. Holograms shimmered with replay footage of the exact moment Elias had consumed the Sathian, much to the growing horror of the diplomatic staff. Under Xandari customs, a protocol officer explained dryly the consumption of Sathian in the presence of a potential partner initiates the first phase of the Brentala, their courtship rite. Doing so without consent while making direct eye contact is equivalent to publicly declaring one's intent to form a lifelong pair bond. So I proposed, by accident, Elias said. More like you initiated a sacred trial without authorization. Tal pinched the bridge of her nose. Ambassador Veln is threatening to withdraw from negotiations unless we remedy this. And how do we remedy that, Elias asked. A new voice entered the conversation, low grating and somehow amused. Trial of clarification rumbled. Commander Vorak, the Kothari representative. The panther-like diplomat entered uninvited, his heavy footfalls shaking the floor. Xandari tradition allows for a trial of clarification in place of a binding. If the challenger proves themselves unsuitable, the rite is voided. What kind of trial? Elias asked warily. The usual, Vorak said with a toothy grin. Tests of intellect, strength, emotional restraint. Sounds easy, Elias said. Vorak chuckled. Not for a human. Hours later, Elias found himself in the envoy's observation garden, a lush, artificial ecosystem brimming with flora from 6 different worlds. It was quiet here, save for the low hum of artificial gravity generators and the faint chirps of nocturnal insects engineered for ambiance. Tyranny stood near a pool of bioluminescent water lilies, her iridescent skin reflecting the glows and shifting patterns of violet and indigo. Elias cleared his throat. Tyranny? She turned slowly. Her expression was unreadable. Lieutenant Reeve. I wanted to apologize, Elias began. I didn't know what Sathian meant. I thought it was a delicacy. It is a delicacy, she said softly, but also a symbol. We offer it only to those we trust enough to let inside our emotional fields. He stepped forward, unsure whether to stop. If I've embarrassed you, you have, she cut in gently. But I am not angry, merely disoriented. They stood in silence for a moment, the tension between them thinner now, stretched like a silk thread instead of coiled wire. I've been told the only way out of this without a galactic incident, Elias said, is to pass something called a trial of clarification. Do you know what that involves? Tiren's gaze flicked to the night-draped canopy. 3 trials, one of perception, one of resolve, one of choice. They are designed to test not only your character, but your alignment with our values. And if I fail, the courtship ends, she said. But so does your credibility, perhaps even your career. And it may insult the Xandari enough to jeopardize the alliance. Elias exhaled sharply. No pressure then. She smiled faintly. There is one more thing. The trials are overseen by a triad of witnesses, one from each involved species. You may not know who they are. Their judgments are final. Sounds fun. You may begin tomorrow if you accept. I do, Elias said without hesitation. Tyrienne blinked. A ripple of color flared across her cheeks, soft orange. Curiosity. Why? Because Elias said, I want to prove that what happened wasn't just a joke or a misstep. It was a mistake, sure, but maybe a meaningful one. Another pause. She nodded. The next morning, Elias entered the crystalline chamber, designated for the first trial. It was empty save for a floating prism that pulsed with a strange internal light. A voice echoed from unseen speakers. Trial 1, Perception. You must identify the hidden truth among illusions. Failure to do so indicates an inability to discern intent from appearance. The chamber walls began to shimmer. The prism multiplied. 10, then 20 copies floated before him, each identical in appearance. Elias narrowed his eyes. Okay, what's different? He circled the array, noting nothing obvious. Then squinting, he realized only one prism cast a shadow. The rest floated in false light. That one, he said, pointing. The rest of the prisms flickered and vanished. A soft chime sounded. First trial complete. Trial 2 came immediately. Elias stood in an empty room while holographic projections of shouting officers, critical mission failures, and Tyrienne's face flushed and accusing surrounded him. You acted without thought. You insulted us. You cost us everything. He dropped to a knee, hands over his ears. This isn't real. None of this is real. But the images persisted. Stop! He yelled. Silence. The holograms froze, then faded. A voice, second trial complete. Resolve intact. Trial 3 choice. Elias was given a tablet. 3 options. Walk away and void the rite. Complete the courtship and accept unknown consequences. Request mediation and delay. He stared at the screen. This is too simple. But the voice answered. Simple choices reveal complex intentions. He tapped the second option. Complete the courtship. Trial complete, the voice said. Await judgment. Tyrienne found him alone an hour later in the envoy's private arboretum, pacing. You chose the second option, she said. Not a question. Elias nodded. I figured if I'm going to screw up intergalactic diplomacy, I might as well do it sincerely. Tyrienne laughed, a true melodic sound. You passed all 3 trials. The judges were surprised. Surprised good or surprised bad. They said it was the most human courtship they had ever witnessed. Elias grinned. I'll take that as a compliment. Tyrienne stepped closer. There is now a 4th stage. Not a trial, but a conversation. One we must have about what happens next. Between us, she nodded. I'd like that, Elias said. And if we continue, she added, you must know Xandari bonds are for life. Elias smiled, a little shaky but genuine. Let's take it one moment at a time. The envoy of Concord entered a high orbit above the gas giant Carvin 6, where its nebular rings painted the sky in swirling ribbons of sapphire and gold. In the command chamber, tensions simmered behind every word and glance. Diplomatic liaisons, military tacticians, and AI advisors moved in coordinated choreography, except for one human who had just survived a Xandari courtship ritual by accident. Lieutenant Elias Reeve stood beside Commander Tal, both watching the slow rotation of the Xandari flagship Cerinthia's Grace through the panoramic viewport. So Tal murmured, You passed their sacred trials and declared a willingness to court an alien dignitary in front of 3 species. That about sum it up, Elias coughed. When you say it like that, it sounds insane. It is insane, she snapped. But somehow it's working. The Xandari have gone from deport the fool to will allow exploratory alliance talks. You realize that you are the exploratory party, right? Yeah, Elias muttered. They made that very clear. Commander Tal crossed her arms. You're either the galaxy's luckiest disaster or its most charming lunatic. I'm voting for charming. She didn't laugh, but he caught a flicker of amusement behind her eyes. A chime interrupted the moment. The holographic form of Ambassador Veln materialized in the room. He looked more composed than during the initial incident, but remained intimidating even in projection. Lieutenant Reeve, you have passed the trial of clarification, Veln intoned. The bond right stands pending the outcome of the final integration phase. Elias raised a hand. Forgive me, Ambassador, but what exactly does that mean? Veln tilted his head. It means you will undergo a sequence of cultural immersions on our vessel. You will live, eat and learn with us for 1 lunar cycle. Tal's expression darkened. That wasn't in the protocol. It is Xandari tradition, Veln replied. The bond is not valid without mutual immersion. Can I bring a toothbrush? Elias asked. Veln ignored the question. Transport will arrive in 1 hour. Lieutenant Reeve, prepare. The hologram vanished. Tal looked like she'd bitten into a lemon. You're going, aren't you? She asked. I kind of have to, don't I? Elias replied. Besides, what's the worst that can happen? The Serenthia's grace was nothing like Elias had expected. Instead of sterile walls and hard angles, the ship was filled with flowing architecture. Everything curved doors, passageways, even furniture and materials pulsed gently with embedded light. The air was warmer than the Envoy's slightly humid, scented faintly, with something like cinnamon and static. Tyren met him at the docking bay. She wore a new gown of deep amethyst silk thread, her bioluminescent skin casting soft glows beneath the thin fabric. Her hair was now braided with pale crystal beads that jingled faintly with movement. Welcome, she said. I hope you don't expect me to wear something that fancy, Elias joked. She smiled. Only if you wish to attend the moonstep ceremony. I don't even know what that is. You will. He followed her down curved halls lined with soft murals and whispering walls. Wherever they walked, Xandari crew members paused to study him, not with hostility but curiosity. Some blinked colors of cautious welcome. Others simply watched in silence. I feel like I'm on display, Elias murmured. You are, Tyren replied. You are the first human to enter our vessel in peace, the first to be invited into our courtship rites. You're a curiosity, perhaps even a symbol. No pressure then. She stopped at a sliding doorway of translucent stone. These are your quarters. The door hissed open, revealing a surprisingly spacious chamber. The ceiling was a dome of dark crystal, showing a holographic night sky. The bed looked like a large flower center, complete with petal-shaped blankets. A meditation circle glowed faintly in one corner. Elias blinked. Wow, this is either incredibly romantic or the start of a very elaborate dream. Tyren turned to him. Tonight you will dine with the House of Solari, my kin group. They will ask questions. They will test you. What kind of tests? Politeness, curiosity, emotional transparency. I'm dead. Tyren gave a rare laugh. Be yourself, just a filtered version. Dinner with the House of Solari took place in a circular chamber filled with tall silvergrass fronds and pools of glowing inkfish. The floor was soft underfoot, and floating dishes carried themselves to diners' tables autonomously. Tyren sat beside Elias, guiding him with quiet whispers. The matriarch elder Sira was regal, her skin pale lavender. With age, her voice smooth like flowing ink. So she said after the first course, you are the human who complimented our Tyranese mastication motions in front of the assembled delegation. Elias winced. In my defense, I thought it was a metaphor. It was Elder Sira replied, an extremely intimate one. He nearly choked on his drink. Another elder leaned forward. Your species is known for impulsiveness. How do we know you will not abandon our Tyren when the novelty fades? Elias straightened. I've made mistakes, sure, but I own them. I'm not here because of novelty. I'm here because I want to understand her, your people, what this connection could mean. The table fell silent. Tyren placed her hand on his under the table, a subtle gesture of support. Later that night, back in his quarters, Elias stared up at the star-domed ceiling. The conversation with the elders had shaken him, but also sharpened something inside him. He wasn't just playing diplomat anymore. He was living diplomacy. A soft chime came from the door. Enter, he said. Tyren stepped inside her gown, exchanged for a simple wrap of translucent cloth. I came to ask if you were all right, she said. The elders are... Direct. Elias sat up. They care about you. I don't blame them. Tiren studied him. You handled yourself well. I think I did okay, he said. Although I might have accidentally promised to marry you again. She laughed gently. There is no need to rush. The final stage is far off. He hesitated. And if it comes, she moved closer. Then we will face it. Together. Or not, but by choice. Elias nodded. Good, because I'm not afraid of choosing you. I just want it to be for the right reasons. Their eyes met. For the first time, there was no accidental tension between them, only intent. Whatever happened next, they would walk into it with open eyes. The Serenthia's grace orbited the golden clouds of Carven 6, like a silver droplet suspended in eternity. Within its fluid corridors, the Xandari prepared for the moonstep ceremony, a ritual seldom shared with outsiders, much less one whose presence had begun with a diplomatic faux pas. Lieutenant Elias Reeve stood before a translucent panel in his quarters, staring at his reflection in the ceremonial robe Tiren had left for him. It was made from layered silk weave, translucent and shifting in hue depending on the ambient light. The fabric whispered against his skin like breath. The color had changed from deep blue to soft silver the moment he put it on, which he suspected meant something, but he had no idea what. Symbolic attire, he muttered. No pressure. A soft chime at the door announced Tiren's arrival. She stepped in gracefully wearing her own ceremonial robe. Hers was darker, threaded with crimson and indigo, and shimmered in waves as she moved. You wear it well, she said, her voice softer than usual. I look like a particularly nervous butterfly, Elias replied. What does silver mean? Readiness, she said simply. Among our kind, it indicates openness to transformation. He blinked. That's unexpectedly accurate. Tiren offered her hand. The moonstep ceremony is not a test. It is a rite of witnessing. You are not being judged tonight, but observed. Your presence speaks to our adaptability. How you carry yourself will say more than your words. Elias nodded, accepting her hand. Lead the way. The ceremony chamber was unlike anything Elias had ever seen. It sat in the core of the ship, suspended in zero gravity between two energy rings. No floor, no ceiling. Just floating platforms of crystal like stepping stones in a sea of stars. Xandari participants moved gracefully through the space, their robes trailing behind them like comets. Soft music resonated from hidden harmonic emitters, less a melody, more an emotional resonance. Tiren led Elias onto the central platform where a single crystal spire rose between them. The voice of Elder Sira rang out across the chamber. Tonight we bear witness to change. The moonstep is not merely a tradition, it is a remembering that all bonds begin in shadow and move towards shared light. Dozens of Xandari surrounded them on drifting platforms, forming a celestial audience. Elias swallowed hard. No pressure, he whispered. Tiren released his hand and stepped back. Follow my lead. Do not mimic, respond. This is a dance of meaning. She raised one hand, palm open. Elias mirrored her. She stepped left, he moved right. She rotated in a spiral, he answered with a steady pivot. Their movements became a conversation, not of words but of attention, response, trust. The music shifted subtly, harmonics deepening. The chamber's ambient light dimmed, and the spire between them began to glow. Tiren extended both hands this time. Elias stepped forward and took them gently in his own. Her skin pulsed a faint peach tone, uncertainty mixed with anticipation. You are learning, she whispered, even when afraid. I'm always afraid, he said, but I show up anyway. A soft ripple of color passed through the gathered Xandari, an emotional response. The ceremony continued for 20 more minutes, each motion in pause, adding to an intricate emotional tapestry. Finally, Elder Sira raised both arms. Shared breath, shared risk, shared witness. The lights brightened slowly, and the harmonic tones faded. Tiren bowed to Elias. You have completed the moon step. He bowed back. Did I do it right? She tilted her head. You did it honestly. Later that evening, in the private meditation chamber assigned to Elias, he replayed the entire event in his mind. He felt tired, not physically, but emotionally, like he'd lifted something heavy with his spirit. The door chimed. Again, it was Tiren. This time she didn't wait for permission before entering. I wanted to explain something, she said. He gestured to the seat across from him. Please. She sat her gown pooling around her like flowing ink. The moon step is not just for bonding. It is also how we identify alignment of intent. And you passed. The council believes you are acting in sincerity, not ambition or confusion. That's good, Elias said. I think. But there is more, she added. Elias leaned forward. Let me guess. There's a surprise fourth rite that requires me to slay a holographic dragon while singing your planetary anthem. Tyren blinked in confusion. What is a dragon? Never mind, she continued. No, the unexpected development is external. There is a political complication. His smile vanished. Of course there is. A vessel has entered our region of shared space. It is Xandari, an independent sovereign race. You may not have heard of them. Elias's blood ran cold. Oh, I've heard of them. We've had encounters. They believe humanity is too unpredictable to be trusted in alliances. They have filed a formal protest with the Stellar Accord, Tyren said. They claim that your bond with me is a covert attempt to infiltrate Xandari political structure. That's absurd, Elias said. I'm barely keeping up with your culture. Infiltration would require a plan. The Xandari do not believe in accidental diplomacy. He stood pacing. What does this mean for us? They have invoked the right of contest. Under Accord law, that means we must provide evidence that our connection is personal, not as strategic. And how do we do that? She stood as well, her tone quiet. We complete the declaration of affinity. He stopped pacing. That sounds ominous. It is rare. It requires us to undergo a neural synchrony, a joining of thoughts and memories, a form of shared introspection, telepathy, not entirely, but close. Elias swallowed. Will it hurt? No, she said, but it will leave no room for falsehood. You cannot hide from me within it, nor I from you. A silence stretched between them, deeper than before. I need to think about this, Elias admitted. Of course, Tyren said. As she turned to leave, he called out. Tyren. She looked back. I've made a lot of mistakes, he said, but this doesn't feel like one of them. Her glow flickered indigo to gold. Gratitude. Hope. I will be here, she said, and the door closed behind her. That night, Elias lay awake beneath the starlit dome. The neural bond. A sharing of thoughts, memories, fears. Could he really expose himself that completely to another being? He thought of Tyren's laughter, her patience, the way she guided rather than corrected. He thought of her hands in his during the moonstep, the rhythm they found without rehearsal, and he realized something simple and terrifying. He didn't want to back away. Not anymore. Lieutenant Elias Reeve stood in the center of the Xandari neural chamber, feeling entirely exposed physically, emotionally, cosmically. The walls of the room were constructed from living crystal that pulsed in time with his heartbeat, or maybe in time with Tyren's, who stood across from him. She looked calm, ethereal, even draped in a robe woven from filaments of shimmering thought silk material that responded to neural impulses with shifting color. His own robe, identical in structure, had turned pale gold, an indicator of nervous anticipation, if the Xandari mood chart was to be trusted. Tyren stepped forward barefoot on the iridescent floor. The room lit up gently beneath her steps. This is the synchronicity rite, she said, her voice hushed and reverent. Once begun, it cannot be reversed. Elias nodded. And the Xandari will accept this as proof. If it is true, she said, they will have no grounds for objection. A false connection burns out, but a real one imprints. Imprints. She placed a hand over her heart. A psychic echo remains. We will carry a part of each other forever. Even if the bond is not completed, it leaves a mark. Elias inhaled slowly. And if it is completed, her eyes shimmered violet. Then it becomes something sacred. The walls pulsed, signaling readiness. Tyren extended her hands. Elias took them. Close your eyes, she whispered, and do not resist. The moment their palms met, Elias felt a low hum vibrate through his bones. Not painful, just deep like the bass of a forgotten song he had always known. He obeyed her instructions and closed his eyes. Then the world unraveled. Time peeled back like mist. Gravity dissolved. And suddenly he was her. He stood in a crystalline corridor as a child, watching elder siblings float gracefully in the moonstep chamber. He remembered the jealousy, the yearning. Another shift, he floated above his own body in a training pod on Luna Base. The smell of coolant and the sting of failure as his piloting test spun into disaster. The shame, the hard lesson that followed. Back again, Tirena's first diplomatic assignment. The pressure of perfect speech. The horror when she mispronounced a ceremonial greeting and caused a diplomatic rift with the Altheiari. Shift. Elias at 16 grinning at his sister as they snuck past curfew. That fleeting joy crushed 2 years later when she died in a shuttle accident, his survivor's guilt etched like stone. The memories blurred, swirled together. Fear, pride, pain, laughter, longing, no walls, no barriers, no secrets. They existed in a shared mental space, emotions naked and untangled. And then something else deeper than memory. Understanding. Not just the facts of their lives, but the texture, the choices that shaped them, the cracks in their resolve, the places where they still hurt. And under it all, Elias found a quiet place in Tirena's mind, a flickering thought she never voiced. I didn't expect to admire him. He sent a response without words, neither did I. When the connection released, they both staggered. Elias caught himself on a crystalline rail. Tirena's eyes shimmered with moisture, her skin flushed with glimmers of gold and crimson. Are you all right? He asked hoarsely. She nodded slowly. It was more than I expected. Same here. The room pulsed once more, indicating the ritual was complete. A chime sounded in the chamber and the crystalline door dissolved to reveal Ambassador Veln. He entered with 2 other high-ranking Xandari and a neutral observer from the Stellar Accord. The bond has been observed, Veln said. A living imprint has been confirmed by the chamber matrix. The declaration of affinity stands. The Stellar Accord observer, a pale, semi-transparent being named Omris, inclined its head. The Drazari challenge has been dismissed. Veln turned to Elias. You have now become a part of our people in ways few outsiders ever will. Elias looked at Tirena. It was never about politics for me. Veln's gaze softened just enough to suggest approval. It shows. Back aboard the envoy of Concord, Commander Tal waited for Elias in the docking bay, arms crossed, as usual, face unreadable. As he stepped down the ramp, she studied him in silence. You look different, she said finally. I feel different, Elias admitted. Tal handed him a data slate. You're officially flagged for dual affiliation with the Xandari delegation. You're also being reassigned as liaison lead for any future Accord treaties involving their species. Elias raised an eyebrow. That sounds like a promotion. It's a loaded one, Tal replied. You're no longer just a representative of Earth. You're symbolic now. A bridge. He swallowed. Am I still part of your team? For now, she said. Until you screw something up so diplomatically significant, you're promoted to ambassador or thrown into the nearest star. Fair enough. She turned to go, then stopped. Reeve. Yeah, good work. She walked away before he could say anything more. That evening, Tirena joined Elias on the Envoy Star Garden, an artificial landscape designed to simulate planetary serenity. A dome of false sky arced overhead, dotted with digitally rendered stars. They sat beneath a tree whose leaves shimmered in soft blues. Have you felt it? Tirena asked. Elias glanced over. Felt what? The echo. The bond's imprint. When I'm near you, it hums, quiet but steady. He placed a hand on his chest. I thought that was just my nervous system freaking out. She smiled. It will fade. Or deepen. He leaned back. We're being watched by a dozen species. Studied, analyzed. Every word between us will be dissected. Then let's make them jealous, she said, her voice playful. He laughed. Is this what you imagined? She asked softly. No, Elias admitted. I imagined disaster and maybe exile. And now, he turned to her. Now I imagine possibility. Her hand found his. So do I. The news broke across 5 systems within a single cycle. Human Xandari neural bond confirmed. Stellar Accord rethinks integration timelines. First interspecies declaration of affinity completed outside Accord protocols. Symbol or scandal, Earth's envoy in uncharted territory. By the time Elias Reeve stepped onto the diplomatic stage in the Accord's floating city of Kelmerian, his name had already been transformed from an obscure communications officer to a household keyword on galactic social media feeds. He hated it. Worse, he had to attend the Joint Assembly, a ceremonial convergence of high-ranking diplomats, military advisors, and cultural strategists, where he and Tyren would serve as the living embodiment of Alliance potential. Elias pulled at the ceremonial collar of his deep navy formal wear, the Terran crest embroidered on his left shoulder. Across from him, Tyren looked entirely at ease, draped in a gown that changed hue and rhythm, with her breathing designed specifically for the cameras. "You're calm," he muttered, as the hover platform descended into the assembly hall. "I was trained for this," she replied. "You were trained to diffuse diplomatic disasters. This is one of those. It started as one. Now it feels like we're the opening act for a galactic wedding." Tyren arched a brow. "Are you having second thoughts about the Alliance? Number about wearing pants this tight?" "Yes." She laughed gently, and the platform came to a halt in the center of the marble-floored hall. Delegates filled the audience tiers above, arranged by species, their respective banners glowing softly behind them. A bell chimed once deep and clear. Elder Vosha of the Accord, a tall crystalline being composed of refracted light, rose from the central dais. "Let it be entered into the official transcript that the Council bears witness to a unique convergence. The first neural bond between Homo sapiens and Xandari has been authenticated. Its effects are ongoing, and its symbolic potential considerable." Murmurs spread through the audience. Some delegates nodded solemnly. Others crossed their arms or blinked in disapproval. The joint assembly now invites Elias Reeve and Tyren of the House Solari to speak. Elias tried not to stumble as he stepped forward. He cleared his throat, then glanced at Tyren, who offered a slight nod of encouragement. "I'm not a politician," he began. "I wasn't raised in a palace or born into a diplomatic family. I learned to fly first, learned to speak later." Soft laughter rippled through the human delegation. "I made a mistake, a small one, a phrase I didn't understand. But instead of leading to insult, it led to curiosity. That curiosity led to understanding. And somehow, despite all odds to trust," he turned toward Tyren. "I didn't come looking for connection. I found it anyway." Tyren stepped forward. Her voice resonated like a low flute. "Our people value intentionality, clarity, but we are not inflexible. What began as error revealed a potential none of us could have predicted. The bond we now carry was not forged by decree, but by decision. We chose to listen rather than judge." The hall was silent. Elder Vosha's light flickered in approval. "Let the record show the Council accepts the bond as authentic and voluntary. Let all further objections be suspended." Cheers erupted from the human and Xandari sectors, but not everyone clapped. In the far-right tier, the Drazari delegation remained stone still. Their lead envoy, a scaled humanoid with obsidian eyes, stood and addressed the chamber. "This bond may be real, but it is dangerous." Elias tensed. The envoy continued, voice clipped. "Emotional entanglement cannot replace calculated diplomacy. One misaligned impulse, one misunderstood memory, and we plunge into chaos." Commander Tal, seated in the human delegation's senior row, stood. "Are you suggesting Earth or Xandari presence be withdrawn? I am suggesting we not allow affection to dictate policy." Tyren's glow dimmed. Elias stepped forward again. With respect, he said, "That's not what this is." "Explain then," the envoy said sharply. "What is it?" Elias took a breath. "This isn't affection replacing policy. This is connection informing it. When people truly understand each other, when they've felt each other's history, it becomes harder to fall into conflict." He gestured around. "We've had rules, protocols, trade routes, peace treaties, but we've never had this. A shared resonance between species born not of design, but of discovery." More silence. Then, to his surprise, a member of the Thorexian Alliance, a species of winged translucent avians, flared their feathers and called out, "We support the bond." A half-dozen other species echoed similar affirmations. Eventually, even the Drazari envoy inclined his head. "We remain unconvinced, but we will observe." Elder Vosha closed the proceedings. "Let the experiment continue." Back in their quarters aboard the envoy, Elias collapsed into the couch, undoing the ceremonial collar and tossing it onto the floor. "That went better than I expected," he said. Tyren paced slowly, her movements fluid but restless. "They will watch us more closely now. I figured as much. They will expect not only harmony, but performance. We are now the reference standard." He frowned. "You're worried. I'm conflicted." Elias sat upright. "About me?" No. About what we represent, about the pressure placed on something still forming. He stood and crossed to her. So let's not let them define it. Tyren turned. How we didn't start this because of a treaty. We started it because I said something stupid and you decided I wasn't a lost cause. She smiled faintly. We own this, he said, not them. And if this bond becomes too much, if it starts becoming a role more than a relationship, then we talk. We reset. Together. She nodded slowly. That is acceptable. High praise. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Tyren said quietly, they will ask us to attend the Rite of Harmony on Xandari Prime. I assume it involves music robes and more staring. Yes, but also a formal culmination, the final affirmation. He blinked. You mean? It is optional, she added, but expected. He stepped closer. Do you want it? I want it to be ours, not theirs. Then he said, we'll make sure it is. Xandari Prime was not what Elias expected. The capital world of one of the most elegant species in the galaxy did not boast towering spires or glimmering metropolises, but rather a sprawling biosphere of crystalline cities that grew organically from the land like coral from the sea. Their buildings pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, slowly shifting to match the moods of their occupants. Every structure was alive, responsive, interactive, evolving. The shuttle landed silently on a floating platform, nestled in a wide valley. Surrounding it were spiraled towers that looked like giant quartz reeds, swaying in an invisible breeze. Elias stepped out into the scented air. It was warm, heavy with spice and ozone. This is it, he said under his breath. The center of Xandari civilization. Beside him, Tyren inhaled slowly. The veil of accord. It is where our kind have sealed alliances, oaths, and unions for millennia. He glanced sideways. And now it's our turn. She nodded. The Xandari High Council had requested strongly that they attend the Rite of Harmony, the final ceremonial stage in their neural bonds recognition. Though it was technically optional, both of them understood that skipping it would be interpreted as retreating from the unity they had symbolized before the galaxy. Still, Elias had insisted on one thing. It had to be real, voluntary, theirs. Now walking side by side through winding crystalline paths with flower-like light wells glowing beneath their feet, he was more certain than ever he wanted this. Not for diplomacy, for them. Preparations for the rite were as complex as the Xandari language. Elias was placed in the care of an elder named Rite, a patient, soft-spoken male whose skin shimmered with deep opal hues. Rite guided him through the ancient meanings of gesture, silence, and breath. Every movement in the ceremony would mean something: submission, acceptance, intimacy, commitment. You are not expected to perform perfectly, Rite said. You are expected to be present. Elias smiled. That I can do. Tyren, meanwhile, underwent her own pre-ceremonial rites, surrounded by her kin and elders who braided her hair with vines of thought root and embedded microcrystals tuned to the frequency of her neural signature. She was quiet during the ritual, but not detached. Her thoughts repeatedly returned to Elias, his voice, his irreverence, the moment he'd chosen to bond, despite the political consequences. He was human in the best ways, flawed, impulsive, but full of sincerity and fire. And tonight they would decide together whether to seal something that might shape the course of galactic history. As twilight settled over the valley, a warm wind swept down from the mountains. Thousands of Xandari gathered in the open-air amphitheater beneath the largest crystal dome on the planet, the luminous confluence. Floating lights danced in the sky, carrying color threads of thought shared by the gathered minds. The air buzzed, not with noise, but shared attention, an emotional current Elias could feel as pressure on his chest. He stood at the center of the platform, facing the rising walkway where Tyren now approached. She was radiant, her gown woven from the same material as his but infused with her neural aura, fluttered like liquid starlight. Her steps were slow, deliberate, ritualistic. He bowed his head. She mirrored him. Silence fell. Elder Syra, her voice magnified through neural resonance rather than technology, addressed the congregation. Tonight we witness not just culmination, but evolution. A bond born of error, shaped by choice, tested by tradition, now completes its arc. She turned to Elias. Do you come of your own will without coercion or mandate? I do, he said. To stand beside one not of your world, Not of your blood, but of your choosing, I do. She turned to Tyran. Do you meet this bond not as symbol, but as self I do? Tyran replied, her voice calm but carrying emotion. Then proceed. They turned to each other. Elias raised both hands, palms outward. Tyran mirrored him. Slowly they moved forward, hands aligning. Their foreheads touched. The crystal beneath them pulsed. A soft hum grew in the air. A warm wave of sensation passed through them, the neural bond flaring with clarity. Their memories brushed against one another again, but this time not as test, but as reaffirmation. He felt her presence, not just her thoughts, but her choice. She felt his devotion, not just affection, but intent. And together they completed the rite of harmony. The gathered Xandari released a collective exhalation of neural light, visible as floating strands of energy weaving upward into the night sky. The bond was now permanent, recognized, unbreakable. Later that evening, long after the crowds had dispersed and the ceremony ended, Elias and Tyran sat in a secluded garden near the platform, surrounded by soft singing crystals that echoed faint emotions in distant harmonies. Elias broke the silence. So, that was the most terrifying wedding I've ever seen. Tyran smiled, her skin shimmering a soft coral. It was not a wedding. It was a culmination. He leaned back on the grass like moss. Feels the same to me. She lay beside him. Perhaps in your culture. He turned to look at her. What happens now? We return, she said, to the accord, to our lives, to what comes next. Elias reached for her hand. Do you regret it? Tyran's eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. No, I chose it, not because I had to, because I wanted to. They sat in quiet contentment for a while. Then she said, there's one more thing, always is. The Xandari High Council has approved an initiative, a joint cultural exchange program. Human and Xandari youth trained together, a shared academy on neutral ground. Elias blinked. They're building a school. Because of us, because of what we proved possible. He chuckled. So we're role models now. Terrifying, isn't it? He looked into her eyes. Only if we stop being ourselves. She leaned closer, her forehead touching his. Again, no ritual, now just intimacy. Then softly, do you want to come with me tonight? Elias didn't answer with words. He kissed her gently, completely, and without fanfare. No observers, no lights, just them. 6 standard months after the Rite of Harmony, the newly commissioned Unity Accord Academy opened its transparent gates on the orbital station Halcyon Spire, a gleaming sanctuary designed by both Xandari architects and human engineers. The structure hovered above the neutral world of Iskelen, orbiting just outside contested space. In a hall lined with banners from every species in the Stellar Accord, Lieutenant Elias Reeve adjusted his formal jacket in the mirror. His reflection stared back at him, older, somehow not in years, but in posture, in presence. This was no longer the uncertain comms officer who'd flubbed a phrase and nearly triggered a diplomatic collapse. This was a man who had helped reshape diplomacy itself. The door slid open and Tyran stepped inside. She wore an updated diplomatic uniform in dark emerald tones, the sleeve adorned with a new insignia, intertwined symbols of Earth and Xandari. You look prepared, she said. I've practiced not fainting during speeches, Elias replied. It's the most important part. She stepped closer, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle on his chest. They asked for us specifically, I noticed, co-head ambassadors of the first intercultural youth delegation. Quite the title. And the expectations, she said, lowering her hand, are immense. Elias took her hand gently. Let them be. We've already done what they said was impossible. Tyran's gaze softened. Do you remember the phrase? He blinked. Which phrase? The one that started all this? Elias groaned. Don't make me say it again. She smiled slyly. You should say it. It's tradition now. Fine. He rolled his eyes dramatically, then cleared his throat and said in perfect Xandari, your mandibles move so gracefully when you eat like moon moths dancing. Tyran flushed a radiant teal. Still scandalous, she murmured, lips brushing his cheek. Still effective, he whispered back. The ceremony took place in the Unity Atrium, a vast crystalline hall, surrounded by floating gardens and observation decks. Delegates, educators, students, and media personnel from over 20 species filled the tiers of the amphitheater. At the center, Elias and Teren stood beside Commander Rana Tal, who now held the title of Director of Galactic Cultural Affairs. Tal leaned toward Elias and whispered, "One more screw-up and I'll make you Chancellor of everything." Elias grinned. Tempting offer. Teren took the podium first. "This academy is not a monument to what we've achieved, but a seed for what has yet to grow. Connection is a living thing. It must be nurtured, not declared." Her voice carried quiet conviction. "Today we offer the next generation a foundation made not from treaties, but from shared experience." Applause rippled like a wave across the chamber. Elias stepped up next. "I never meant to start anything," he said, "but I've learned that meaning well is never enough. You have to do well, show up, try again, and most of all, listen." He looked out over the gathered students, Xandari, Human Gorthai, even a pair of Drazari twins seated near the front. "I hope this place becomes more than a school," he said. "I hope it becomes proof. That connection doesn't have to be perfect, just real." In the weeks that followed, Elias and Teren found a rhythm. They co-taught an introductory course in cultural empathy and diplomacy. Their styles couldn't have been more different. He told stories, cracked jokes, broke tension. She offered depth, balance, precision. Their students adored them, and yet not everything was calm. One evening, as they returned to their shared quarters overlooking the garden decks, Teren was quiet. Her skin glowed in pale spirals, uncertainty. Elias noticed instantly. "You're thinking," he said. "I've been contacted," she replied, "by the High Council." He closed the door behind them. "What's wrong?" "They've asked me to join the core assembly." Elias blinked. "That's the second highest governing body on Xandari Prime. I would have to return, permanently. My duties here would end." He exhaled. "I see." Teren stepped closer. "I haven't decided. Because of me, because of us." Silence lingered, not uncomfortable, but heavy with weight. Elias finally spoke. "You should take it, if it's what you want." Teren's voice was soft. "And what of us?" He looked at her, feeling a mixture of pride, sadness, and something deeper. "You once told me our bond left a mark, that it can't be undone." She nodded slowly. "Then no matter where you go, it stays," he said. "And maybe I come with you, eventually, if that's still the future we want." Her glow warmed to gold and rose relief and affection. "I want that. Then we'll figure it out." 6 months later, on the balcony of a Xandari observatory overlooking the twin suns of their homeworld, Elias Reeve stood beside Teren once more, not as a visiting human, not as an ambassador, as a partner. The stars above them blinked in patterns of unfamiliar light, and still he could name none of them without help. But it didn't matter. Teren reached for his hand. "Are you afraid always?" he said. "But I've learned to follow the fear, to whatever matters most." They leaned into one another, gazing into a future uncertain but shared. And somewhere in the vastness of stars and soft murmurs of cosmic wind, the galaxy continued to turn. But now it did so with one more bond between worlds, forged by accident, sealed by choice, and destined to be remembered.